The chamber of the Galactic Council was a hollow sphere of mirrored glass, hanging above the twin suns of Ajax Prime. Delegates from 100 worlds sat in rings of light, murmuring in their own languages. Every few seconds, the translation lattice rippled as phrases collided, creating a low mechanical hum, like nervous breathing. At the center of the hall, a holographic projection spun slowly, the recording of the incident. A desert planet, pale and wind-cut. An apex beast, the Zeroth, 30 meters of muscle and armor-plated hide. It roared once, sound rippling across dunes like thunder. Then the image glitched, refocused, and a smaller shape appeared below it, a human in black armor and a squat, bristling creature that looked almost ridiculous beside the monster. The creature lunged. The feed filled with static, then cleared to show the Zeroth lying still. The council chamber erupted in a storm of alien voices. "This is impossible," barked the Archon representative, all mandibles and silver chitin. "The Zeroth was bred to resist plasma and vacuum. You expect us to believe an Earth mammal killed it?" Another voice, silk smooth, belonging to a scaled ambassador from the Vereen. "It was no ordinary mammal. The report names it a honey badger. A primitive carnivore modified with human cybernetics." The room hissed with disbelief. Across the hall, the Anrel scholar clicked her talons against the table. "And the human who controls it? Commander Christopher. Formerly known as James, Earth scientist. Missing for 6 cycles. Now apparently the most dangerous being alive," muttered another. The High Chancellor lifted one long hand. Silence dropped like gravity. "Bring in the human." A door unfolded from the wall. Commander Christopher walked in without escort. His armor was matte black, scarred but spotless. No weapon at his side. His eyes, pale gray, reflected the light of 100 worlds without a flicker of fear. He stopped in the center of the chamber, looked up at the projection of the Zeroth's corpse, then at the assembled species. "You wanted to know about the honey badger," he said. His voice was steady, almost polite. "You'd better sit down." Murmurs spread again, but he ignored them. "The Zeroth wasn't the first to try," he added, glancing at the hologram. "Just the latest." The High Chancellor's crest shifted, a sign of unease. "You admit the creature is yours?" Christopher's mouth curved slightly. "Mine." "No. We're partners." "Partners," the Archon repeated, voice dripping disbelief. "You claim to have reasoned with that thing?" Christopher tilted his head. "You call it a thing. We call it courage in fur and steel." Silence held. Then the Chancellor gestured. "Explain." He took a slow breath. "You wouldn't understand the present without the past. So let's rewind. Before Commander Christopher, there was Dr. James. Before war, there was curiosity. And before the galaxy feared us, we just wanted to survive." The lights dimmed automatically as the recording faded. In the darkness, his voice deepened. "You want the truth? It started on Earth. In a lab that smelled of ozone and wet soil. The lab was buried beneath the ruins of what used to be Johannesburg's biotech quarter, a labyrinth of shattered steel and broken dreams. James remembered the sound of rain hammering against the concrete ceiling, the smell of rust and old fire. He'd been young then, younger than he felt he deserved to be, already scarred by the wars that had eaten half the planet. The world above had given up on courage. But James hadn't. He was obsessed with a question that the rest of the world mocked: could fear itself be engineered out of existence? He'd studied every predator left on Earth, from lions to sharks to falcons. But one small creature stood out, a honey badger. A ridiculous name for something so untouchable. Videos of it tearing through venomous snakes and hyenas played on loop in his lab. The creature didn't care about size or power. It didn't care about losing. It just kept going. That was what humanity had lost, the ability to keep going. He had the samples, the genome, the muscle tissue. And when the war councils cut his funding, he kept working in secret. Cybernetics, neural interfaces, adaptive bone lattices, his genius bordered on madness. The honey badger was his muse, his experiment, and in a way, his confession. He remembered the night it came alive. A metallic cry echoed through the lab as the containment field flickered. The creature was small at first, barely half a meter tall, but its body was dense, rippling with nanofiber musculature. Its eyes gleamed gold under the sterile light. It looked up at James with a stare that wasn't animal anymore. He whispered, "You're awake, little one." It blinked. The sensors screamed warnings about neural feedback spikes, but he ignored them. He raised a trembling hand toward the glass. The creature tilted its head, mimicked his gesture, and touched the barrier with a claw. In that instant, their neural links synced. Pain slammed into James's skull. He saw flashes of instincts, rage, hunger, defiance, but beneath it all, something startlingly familiar, recognition. The bond stabilized. James collapsed, gasping. The creature paced, testing its claws, its reinforced frame. It didn't growl or attack. It just waited. He named it Ajax. Over the next months, Ajax learned fast. Too fast. It could understand simple commands, then complex ones, then the logic of combat simulations. James tested it against machines, then drones. Ajax tore them apart. Every failure only made it more efficient. But the military found out. They always do. A Black Ops division came to confiscate the project. James tried to reason with them. They called him unstable, claimed the experiment was a weapon of mass instability. They were right. Just not in the way they thought. When the soldiers tried to sedate Ajax, it fought back. Not out of aggression, but protection. They fired stun rounds, tranquilizers, even plasma pulses. The creature shrugged them off. In the chaos, one of the officers fired a live round. James dove between them and took the hit. He remembered blood on the tiles. He remembered Ajax howling. Then nothing. When he woke, the lab was gone. So was Ajax. Years passed. The world burned again. And somewhere between the ashes of Earth and the stars beyond, James became someone else. Commander Christopher. He built ships. He fought wars. He outlived everyone who told him no. But in the back of his mind, he kept wondering, what happened to Ajax? Until one day, the answer found him. On the outer rim of the Vega expanse, a distress call came from a research colony under siege by something unstoppable. Christopher went, expecting another alien experiment gone wrong. What he found was worse, familiar. A shadow moved through the wreckage, low to the ground, tearing through steel like fabric. A cybernetic snarl cut through the static. For the first time in decades, he heard that sound again. Ajax. He was bigger now, 2 meters at the shoulder, plated with biosteel and rage. Christopher stepped into the open, heart pounding. The creature froze mid-charge, nostrils flaring, golden eyes widening. Recognition again. "Easy, boy," Christopher whispered. For a moment, the galaxy held its breath. The creature's rumbling growl tapered into a low, uncertain sound. The golden eyes blinked once, twice, as though searching through memory. Christopher took another step forward, boots crunching over broken glass and fragments of armor plating. "Ajax," he said softly. "You remember." The great animal's head tilted. Then, in one slow motion, it lowered itself to the ground, claws carving furrows into the metal floor. Christopher let out the breath he'd been holding. He knelt, reaching out a hand. The fur felt different now, part synthetic, part real, hot to the touch, like an engine housing that never cooled. Ajax rumbled and pressed its head against his palm. For the first time in years, Christopher felt the strange, shared pulse through the link, a pattern of recognition and relief. Behind them, his soldiers hesitated. One of them whispered over the comms, "Commander, what is that thing?" Christopher didn't look back. "That thing," he said, "is why we're still alive." He rose and faced the twisted horizon. The alien attackers, the Aerith Coalition, were regrouping beyond the colony wall, their armored transports glowing red in the dust storm. "Ajax," he said, "you up for one last test?" The creature gave a short, sharp grunt that sounded almost like a laugh. The battle that followed entered the archives of 3 civilizations. The colony's drones caught only fragments. Blurs of motion, bursts of light, shapes tearing through machinery. The Aerith fired plasma barges that melted rock, Ajax plowed through them. A beam meant to cut through starship hulls hit its flank and diffused across the nanofiber plating, leaving only a hiss of steam. Christopher moved through the wreckage like a shadow, directing Ajax with clipped hand signals. They moved as one, a rhythm of destruction and precision no artificial intelligence could match. When it was over, the desert was quiet again. The Aerith ship smoldered. Christopher stood beside the creature, panting. The wind carried the smell of ozone and iron. Ajax's armor was cracked, blood seeping through in small, dark rivulets, but it was alive. He rested a hand on its shoulder. "You did good." The creature turned its head and met his eyes. The connection flickered, images, sensations, fragments of shared memory, and Christopher saw flashes of the old lab, the gunfire, his own blood on the floor. Ajax had remembered it all. Later, when the rescue team arrived, they found him sitting beside the beast, staring at the horizon. The report spread. A human commander had tamed a cybernetic monster. A honey badger, they called it, though by now the name barely fit. Soon, stories warped into legend. Some said the creature couldn't die, others claimed it feared nothing, not even gods. The council's reaction was predictable, fear disguised as diplomacy. They summoned him to account for what they called a biological weapon of terror. He came anyway, with Ajax. In the council chamber, as the holograms flickered and alien voices rose in accusation, Christopher didn't bother to defend himself. "You're afraid because you don't understand," he told them. "You think power is about control. We learned power is about trust." "Trust?" hissed the Virine delegate. "You trust that thing?" Christopher looked at Ajax, lying calmly at his feet. The beast's eyes glowed faintly gold under the chamber lights. "I trust it more than I trust any of you," he said. A ripple of unease moved through the crowd. The High Chancellor leaned forward. "Then enlighten us, Commander. How did you build such loyalty into a creature born of rage?" Christopher's gaze hardened. "You don't build it. You earn it. And that story starts long before the council ever heard my name." He paused. The lights dimmed slightly as if the chamber itself leaned in. "You want to understand the honey badger," he said quietly. "Then you need to understand what it means to be human." The alien murmurs faded. The holographic recorders focused on him. He closed his eyes for a moment, and when he spoke again, his voice carried the weight of every war, every scar, every sleepless night of survival. "It began," he said, "in the last days of Earth's silence. The stars above the ruins of Earth burned pale through a haze of ash and debris. Cities were gone, replaced by silence and the whisper of orbital junk slicing across the upper atmosphere. James, no, not James anymore, stood on a cliff overlooking what used to be the Atlantic coast. The water was black and still, reflecting the dying glow of a power plant miles away. The war that had shattered humanity wasn't the work of aliens or machines. It was them, people, burning themselves out in a race to survive the planet they'd poisoned. Nations fractured, corporations turned into governments, and scientists like James became commodities. When the last satellites fell, so did the illusion of progress. He had survived because he was too stubborn to die. Ajax had disappeared, his body still carried the neural scars from the broken link. But even through the static in his head, he could feel something, a pulse, far away, like a heartbeat echoing in deep water. He followed it. Smugglers took him off-world. The first time he saw a space through a cracked shuttle window, he didn't feel awe, only guilt. Somewhere below, a species that once thought itself immortal had burned its cradle to cinders. He promised himself that whatever came next, he'd never let humanity forget what survival really meant. The outer colonies were chaos, half pirate, half prison. The air stank of ozone and desperation. That's where he learned what power meant outside laboratories. You couldn't hide behind equations when someone was pointing a plasma pistol at your head. He adapted fast. He traded biotech knowledge for ship parts, cybernetics, weapons. He modified his own neural link, reforging it to interface with alien systems. Every upgrade made him less James, more something else, something colder, faster, sharper. Years blurred. He fought mercenary wars, built fleets, and learned to command a kind of loyalty that couldn't be programmed. They started calling him Commander Christopher after the ship he'd built himself, the Saint Christopher, a symbol of the old Earth myth, the patron of travelers. The name stuck. But no matter how far he went, the echo never left him. Sometimes in dreams he'd see flashes of golden eyes, the shimmer of fur lined with steel. Sometimes, when the neural storms hit, he'd hear a low growl under the static. Then one night, while anchored in the nebular rings of Tyrus, the ship's AI detected an encrypted signal. The pattern matched the ancient link signature from the Honey Badger project. He traced it to a derelict vessel drifting between systems, Aerith markings, half devoured by radiation storms. Inside, among broken containment pods and alien corpses, was a single stasis chamber still humming faintly. The ID tag on its interface read Subject 01A, Ajax. His heart almost stopped. The glass was fogged, the body inside barely visible, more machine than flesh now. But the vitals were there. Weak. Waiting. He knelt beside the pod and pressed a hand to the glass. "You stubborn bastard," he whispered. It took days to restore power. When the chamber finally hissed open, Ajax staggered out, coughing static through its respirators. Its eyes met his, and that same instant link from years ago reconnected, painful, raw, and absolute. A lifetime of distance vanished. Ajax had survived, alone, hunted, and rebuilt by alien scavengers. And now, somehow, it had found its way back. Christopher didn't see it as a miracle. He saw it as proof. Proof that humanity's refusal to quit was contagious, even across species and steel. Together, they rebuilt the St. Christopher. Ajax learned to move through its corridors like a silent ghost. The crew, terrified at first, grew used to the beast's presence. It protected them, almost, watched over them. Then came the call for help from the colony that changed everything. When Christopher and Ajax arrived and annihilated the apex beast, the galaxy took notice. The council wanted answers. What they got instead was revelation. In the council chamber, after his words hung in the air, the silence grew thick. No one dared speak. The Virene delegate finally rasped, "You claim this bond between you and the creature transcends control?" Christopher nodded once. "It's not about control. It's about respect." The Arcan ambassador's mandibles clicked irritably. "And what happens when respect fails? When the beast turns on you?" Christopher's expression didn't change. "Then it kills me. That's the deal." That answer unsettled them more than any threat could. From where Ajax lay beside him, the creature let out a soft, rumbling snort, as if it understood the joke no one else did. The High Chancellor's crest pulsed a faint violet, the color of distrust. Around the chamber, holographic recorders floated like silent insects, capturing every twitch of muscle, every flicker of expression. "You will permit the council scientists to examine it," the Chancellor said, voice smooth but brittle. Christopher's gray eyes narrowed. "It's not in it. And no one touches him." The murmur that followed was almost musical, a chorus of disbelief. The Virene ambassador leaned forward, serpentine scales catching the light. "Commander, this council governs 53 worlds. You are one human with a pet." "Pet?" The word slipped from Christopher like a blade from its sheath. He didn't raise his voice, but the temperature in the room seemed to drop a few degrees. You call something a pet when you need to feel safe. We don't do safe. We do survival. The Archon delegate struck the table with a claw. Then prove it. Show us this bond you speak of. Ajax's golden eyes flickered open. The creature had been lying motionless until that moment, like a coiled storm waiting for the sky to crack. Its gaze moved slowly from alien to alien, a predator's study. Christopher exhaled once. You sure about that? The Archon hissed. We are. A security field unfolded between the council tiers. A translucent dome of containment energy. Christopher walked into the center, Ajax padding behind him, claws scraping softly against the polished floor. Inside the field, the atmosphere shifted. The translation matrix struggled to interpret the growl resonating in the creature's chest. Release the drone, the Chancellor ordered. A small black sphere detached from the ceiling and unfolded midair into a tri-legged security bot, armed with plasma lances. Its optics flared to life. Christopher didn't move. Neither did Ajax. Begin. The bot lunged. To the naked eye, Ajax simply vanished. One heartbeat later, the drone's chassis crumpled inward, folded like paper, and clattered to the floor. The containment field shuddered from the shockwave. Gasps rippled through the tiers. The High Chancellor's crest flared white. Again, whispered the Virene. 10 more drones activated, circling the field in coordinated formation. Ajax's fur stood on end, plates shifting along its back. Christopher lifted one hand. The creature stopped moving, waiting for the gesture. He whispered a single word. Now. Light and sound exploded together. Metal shards struck the containment field like hail. The drones didn't even have time to scream their alert tones. When the glow faded, Ajax was standing in the middle of a crater of melted alloy, perfectly still. Christopher turned to the council. Satisfied? The Archon delegate's mandibles clicked nervously. That thing could destroy this chamber. Christopher looked at him, unblinking. Only if I told it to. The Chancellor's voice returned, softer now. You claim you control it through respect. Yet it obeys your every word. It obeys because it chooses to, Christopher said. We built trust in fire and blood. It's not something you can simulate in a lab. A hush fell. Even the translation lattice seemed reluctant to break it. From his place by the field, Christopher placed a hand on Ajax's neck. The beast lowered its head, almost like a bow. The Chancellor finally said, Then tell us, Commander. Why did you bring it here? Why risk the panic that its presence creates? Christopher's gaze lifted, his voice quiet but cutting through the air like a pulse. Because you're about to make the same mistake Earth made, he said. You think safety comes from removing danger. It doesn't. It comes from understanding it. The alien delegates looked at one another, unsettled. Ajax gave a soft growl, half warning, half agreement. Fear is what keeps you from evolving, Christopher continued. We learned that the hard way. You can't program courage. You have to face something that terrifies you and keep going anyway. The council chamber seemed to shrink around him. And in our case, he added, that courage just happens to have claws. The council dismissed for the night, but Christopher didn't leave. He could feel the tension bleeding through the walls of the grand chamber. The alien delegates' voices echoed down the crystalline corridors, some low and fearful, some coldly calculating. Ajax walked beside him, silent except for the faint hiss of servos beneath its armored hide. The observation deck at the edge of the station overlooked the gas giant below. Twin storms spun lazily in the red clouds. Christopher stood there for a long time, arms folded, thinking of how familiar alien fear had begun to feel. Behind him, the sound of boots approached, too quiet, too organized. He didn't turn. You should have left while they still respected your rank, said a voice. The accent was clipped, military. I don't work for them, Christopher replied. Four figures emerged from the shadows, soldiers in pale armor bearing the sigil of the Trezari Research Directorate. They were scientists with guns, the worst kind. Our superiors believe your creature poses a significant threat to interstellar stability, the lead one said. They've ordered us to remove it for study. Christopher's gaze didn't shift from the storm outside. You try, and it will be the last order they ever give you. The soldiers raised their rifles. Stand down, Commander. We have authorization. Ajax's head lifted slightly, the faint glow of its eyes reflecting in the glass. The soldier's sensors pinged alerts, rising heat, elevated EM output. Christopher turned at last. Authorization means nothing to something that doesn't know fear. The first rifle discharged. The plasma bolt stopped midair, caught in the containment field Ajax generated instinctively when its partner was threatened. The air vibrated like a struck bell. Then the creature moved. Two of the soldiers were disarmed before they could blink. The third was pinned against the wall, armor screeching as claws pressed against it. Christopher stepped forward through the chaos, his expression unreadable. Call them off, the leader choked. Christopher stopped a meter away. Ajax isn't mine to command. He's deciding if you're worth sparing. The leader tried to raise his weapon again. Ajax's eyes narrowed. The rifle melted, slag dripping onto the deck. Enough, Christopher said softly. The creature released the soldier, who fell gasping to the floor. You tell your directorate that the next time they try to take what isn't theirs, I'll let him finish the job. The soldiers retreated, dragging their wounded. The echo of their footsteps faded, leaving only the hum of the station. Ajax looked up at Christopher, head tilting slightly. The human's expression softened. I know. You didn't want to hurt them. But they'll never stop. The creature gave a low sound, part sigh, part growl. Christopher knelt, resting a hand against its thick neck. Through the link came a flicker of emotion, frustration, fatigue, something almost human. He whispered, we'll find peace one day. Maybe. The lights above flickered. He felt a pulse in his skull, memories trying to break the surface. The neural link always did this when his mind wandered too close to the past. He sat down on the cold deck, back against the wall, watching the gas giant's endless storms. Ajax curled beside him, still and alert. You ever wonder why I did it? He said quietly. Why I built you? The creature's eyes glowed faintly. Through the bond came a wash of curiosity. Christopher smiled faintly, the kind that never reached his eyes. I thought I was fixing humanity. I thought if I could build something that never quit, never ran, I could give us a symbol. I didn't realize I was building a mirror. He looked out again at the storms. We never stopped fighting, not the world, not each other, not ourselves. When I made you, I gave you that same curse. He closed his eyes. But maybe that's what keeps us alive. The station's internal chronometer ticked quietly. Somewhere in the distance, alarms began to sound, a breach, a ship leaving unauthorized. He didn't need a report to know who it was. The Directorate hadn't learned their lesson. Christopher stood, pulling his coat tight. Ajax rose beside him, muscles coiling, the faint shimmer of energy rippling across its armor. Looks like they want round two, Christopher murmured. Let's remind them what fearlessness looks like. Ajax's growl rolled through the corridor like thunder. Together they moved toward the hangar bay, where shadows of ships and soldiers waited in the crimson emergency light. The hangar was chaos wrapped in silence, the kind of silence that came before a storm. Rows of alien vessels shimmered under emergency strobes, sleek and cold. The Directorate soldiers had returned with heavier weapons, armored walkers, and drones buzzing like angry wasps. Christopher and Ajax emerged from the corridor, just two figures against an army. The nearest alien officer raised a hand. Commander Christopher, by order of the Galactic Council, you are to surrender the hybrid construct immediately. Christopher didn't even slow. You people never learn. Ajax crouched low, its armor plates shifting like tectonic plates, exposing lines of glowing circuitry that pulsed with organic rhythm. The air began to vibrate, the signature of its combat charge. "Target the creature," shouted the officer. Beams of plasma lanced through the air, crackling against the hangar shields. Ajax roared, a sound that wasn't natural, halfway between an engine and a wild beast. The first volley didn't even reach him. Energy shimmered, redirected, and folded outward. Drones dropped like flies. Christopher drew his sidearm, not a weapon of alien make but old Earth steel and plasma fused through tech he'd designed himself. Every shot hit like lightning, precise, unrelenting. He moved like he'd done this 1,000 times before, and he had. A walker turned its cannon toward him. The blast came, but Ajax was faster, intercepting it midair, slamming into the machine with such force that metal screamed. The beast ripped it apart, hydraulic fluid and sparks splattering the floor. "Ajax!" Christopher barked. The creature paused mid-strike, its breathing heavy, sensors glowing hot white. "Non-lethal." Ajax hesitated, then slammed its claw into the ground, releasing a controlled shockwave. Every soldier in a 20-meter radius was thrown off their feet, weapons shorting out. The silence afterward was deafening. Smoke drifted through the air. Christopher stood in the center of it, the edges of his coat glowing faintly from plasma heat. A voice came through the comm system, harsh and cold. "James Hartwell." He froze. Nobody had called him that name in years. "James Hartwell," the voice repeated. "You thought changing your name would erase what you did. The Directorate remembers. Earth remembers." He turned slowly toward the central comm terminal. The image flickered to life, a woman, her uniform black, insignia sharp as a blade. Her eyes carried the weight of betrayal. "Dr. Mara Kell," he said softly. "Didn't think they'd send my former partner." "You built that monster," she said. "You broke every genetic law in the book, fusing machine, human, and predator DNA. You disappeared before we could stop you." Christopher's expression didn't change. "You called it a monster. I called it evolution. You called it Project Ajax," she snapped. "Do you even remember why we started it?" His eyes flickered, haunted. "To protect humanity." Mara's voice dropped. "You built something that doesn't die, James. You turned pain into programming. You made fear obsolete. And now you've unleashed it." Ajax stepped closer, growling softly. Christopher raised a hand, signaling him to stand down. "He's not unleashed. He's alive." The woman leaned forward in the hollow feed. "You can't control what you built. You never could. Surrender him, or I'll burn that station down with both of you inside." Christopher tilted his head, almost smiling. "You won't have to." He turned to Ajax. "Time to show her what you really are." The beast stepped forward into the light, its armor peeling back slightly to reveal the fusion of sinew and machine beneath. But there was something more, an intelligence, an emotion flickering behind the mechanical gaze. Christopher spoke, voice steady. "He's not a weapon, Mara. He's what comes after weapons. The part of humanity that refuses to be afraid." Mara hesitated. For a moment, the fire in her eyes faltered. "You always believed in monsters," she said quietly. He met her gaze. "I believed in survival." The comm cut out. Sirens blared again. Council reinforcements were approaching. Christopher sighed, exhaustion cutting through the adrenaline. "Let's go, Ajax. Time we moved." The creature rumbled low agreement. Together they stepped onto the launch deck, into the stolen transport waiting for them. As the ship rose through the hangar's open bay doors, the stars stretched into lines. Christopher sank into the pilot's seat, breathing hard. His hands trembled. Ajax tilted its head, concerned. "I'm fine," he said softly. "Just, old ghosts." The creature pressed its head gently against his shoulder. A pulse of warmth flowed through their link, a rare gesture of comfort. Christopher closed his eyes for a long moment. When he opened them again, the stars had steadied, and so had he. "You want the truth, Ajax? The real story?" The creature blinked slowly. He smiled faintly. "All right. You've earned it." And for the first time since the war, James Hartwell, now Christopher, began to tell his story. The voice of a man who'd seen worlds burn filled the quiet hum of the ship as it drifted into the deep black. The hum of the engines was a steady lullaby against the void. Christopher's eyes stayed fixed on the streaking stars ahead, but his mind had already fallen backward through time, through smoke and blood and metal. He said quietly, almost to himself, "Before all this, before Ajax, I was a scientist. Not a soldier." The name was James Hartwell then. "I worked at Epsilon Prime, under the old United Earth Directorate. We were trying to build the next generation of planetary defense. They called it Project Honey Badger." Ajax shifted slightly beside him, listening. Christopher gave a humorless laugh. "Do you know why they chose that name? Because it was supposed to be fearless. Small, tenacious, unstoppable. No matter what you threw at it, it fought back. It didn't care if it was outnumbered, outgunned, dying, it kept going." The memory hit like a punch. The sterile labs, the blue light of data screens, the hum of genetic vats. The smell of ozone and iron. He could almost hear his younger voice, confident, arrogant. "We thought we could engineer that spirit into something mechanical. Merge biology and technology until fear itself was outdated." He closed his eyes, the stars fading into the cold walls of the laboratory in his mind. He could see the first prototypes, muscle fiber grown on titanium skeletons, neural networks teaching themselves pain thresholds. They had no consciousness then. Just instinct. And then came the incident. He saw the containment bay, alarms screaming red. One of the prototypes had broken free, tearing through walls, clawing at its own flesh as if trying to escape its own body. It wasn't rage, it was confusion. Fear. James had stood there, watching his creation suffer. "End it," one of the soldiers had yelled. But he couldn't. He'd shut down the system himself, cradling the twitching form as it died in his arms. That night he made a decision. If they were going to make a fearless being, it couldn't be through programming. It had to understand fear first. It had to learn to overcome it, not be born without it. That was the night Ajax's embryo was conceived. The night James Hartwell stopped being just a scientist. The flashback shifted. The war had begun, alien incursions, raids on the colonies, chaos spreading faster than governments could control. The Directorate turned Project Honey Badger into a weapon. They bred hundreds of cybernetic beasts, but only one survived maturation, Ajax. He remembered the first time Ajax opened its eyes. It had been just a creature then, trembling, covered in nanofiber plating and synthetic fur. But there had been awareness. It recognized him. "You looked at me," Christopher whispered to the silent ship, "and I saw it. Understanding. Like you'd already decided who you were." He saw the battlefields again, burning cities, alien ships blotting out the sun. The Honey Badger units fought alongside soldiers, tearing through enemy lines. They were unstoppable, until the Directorate decided they didn't need humans anymore. Christopher's voice hardened. "They wanted to replace us. Humanity's courage in a bottle. That's what Mara wanted, to build obedience into instinct. So he betrayed them. He broke into the central labs, wiped the AI cores, freed Ajax, and burned the research to the ground. He escaped Earth with nothing but guilt and a dying conscience. The memory ended in flames, Epsilon Prime collapsing under orbital bombardment, the sound of Mara's voice screaming his name through static. The ship hummed again, bringing him back. Ajax's golden eyes glowed faintly, reflecting his human companion's pain. "She survived," Christopher murmured. "Of course she did. People like her always do. They rebuild the system. They never ask if it should exist." He reached out, resting his hand on Ajax's armored hide. "But you're the one good thing that came from that nightmare." Ajax blinked slowly. Through the neural link came a faint pulse, comfort. Christopher leaned back in his seat. "The council thinks they fear the honey badger. They don't understand what that means. It's not an animal. It's what happens when humanity refuses to kneel. When we fight back even when we've already lost." He looked out at the dark between stars. "They're about to remember." A proximity alarm began to blink. Multiple ships on intercept course, Council insignia, Directorate markings behind them. Christopher smiled, grim and tired. Of course. They never let go. Ajax growled low, armor plates locking into combat configuration. He flipped the ship's comm switch. "This is Christopher, formerly James Hartwell. If you're chasing us, you'd better pray we stop before you catch up." Then to Ajax, with a half-smile, ready to show them what a honey badger really is. Ajax's growl deepened into something like laughter, and the ship turned toward the approaching lights. The void outside erupted in motion, starlight bending across the jagged field of tumbling asteroids. Christopher's ship dove into the chaos, the hull shuddering as fragments scraped past. Behind them, the Council interceptors fanned out, their sleek hulls glinting like knives. The Directorate's heavier cruisers loomed farther back, slower but relentless. Christopher's eyes flicked across the holographic console. His voice was calm, every syllable controlled. "Evasive pattern Gamma 3. Keep us close to the debris, use their sensors against them." Ajax moved silently into position, connecting with the ship's combat interface through its neural port. The creature's consciousness spread across the systems, reaction times multiplying tenfold, senses merging with machinery. The lights inside the cockpit dimmed, replaced by the faint bioluminescent glow of Ajax's synaptic circuits. A Council fighter cut across their flank, plasma fire flashing. Christopher twisted the yoke hard, inertia pressing him back into the seat. The ship spiraled between two massive asteroid shards, flames licking across the shields. Ajax responded instantly, redirecting power to the aft thrusters and returning fire with pinpoint accuracy. The fighter disintegrated in silence, torn apart by a burst of ionized plasma. "Good," Christopher muttered. "But don't kill them all. We need one alive." Through the link, Ajax's pulse vibrated, a low note of frustration. "I know," Christopher said quietly. "It's easier to fight than to forgive." A missile alert screamed. Two Directorate cruisers had locked on, their heavy warheads closing fast. He could almost hear Mara's voice behind them, cold, calculating. "Brace," he said. "Ajax, pattern Helios." The beast's eyes glowed white-hot as it synced with the ship's reactor. Energy flared through the hull, bending gravity for a split second. The ship flipped end over end, spinning around the missiles, then shot directly through the asteroid belt's densest cluster. The pursuing ships couldn't follow. One missile detonated prematurely, the explosion sending a rain of molten rock through the void. The blast wave hit them, shields flaring. Christopher gritted his teeth, steering manually through the shock. "We're not done yet." They burst out the far side of the belt, into open space, and straight toward a derelict orbital refinery. The facility hung like a skeleton, all twisted girders and flickering lights. Christopher smiled faintly. Perfect. He cut main engines, letting inertia carry them forward. The ship glided into the refinery's shadow. Ajax disengaged the neural link and crouched beside him, armor flexing as the beast adjusted to manual control again. Christopher stood, rolling his shoulders. They'll send a boarding team. Let them. Time they met the real reason humanity still owns its nightmares. Moments later, the sound of metal claws on hull echoed through the ship, magnetic grapples, airlock cutters. Christopher and Ajax waited in the dim red emergency glow, the air heavy with the scent of ozone and oil. The first hatch blew open. Alien soldiers poured through, Council troops in polished armor, their weapons crackling with containment fields. Christopher didn't hesitate. His sidearm flared once, twice, 3 times. Each shot was precise, disabling, not killing. Ajax moved like a ghost behind him, intercepting every blast, slamming attackers aside with brutal efficiency. The aliens shouted something in their language, a word for monster. Christopher's voice was low, almost gentle. "You're right." He caught the nearest soldier by the collar and pulled him close. "Tell your council, humans don't create monsters. We become them when we have to." He threw the soldier aside as Ajax lunged past, clearing the corridor. The last enemy fell, weapon clattering to the deck. Christopher exhaled, chest rising and falling, eyes distant. He wasn't the man from Epsilon Prime anymore. That version had died in the fires of his own creation. The one standing here was something else, something born from necessity. Ajax looked back, breathing heavy, sensors cooling. The beast tilted its head, studying him. Christopher nodded slowly. "Yeah," he murmured. "I see it too." He turned toward the viewport. The remaining enemy ships were regrouping, holding position, hesitant now. They'd seen the transmi. Cyan feed from the boarding team's helmets. "Broadcast open," he ordered. The comm light flickered green. "This is Commander Christopher," he said into the void. "Once, I was Dr. James Hartwell. I built what you fear. You call him the honey badger, the apex of defiance. But he's not your enemy. He's proof." He paused, voice steady, resonant. "Proof that fear isn't weakness, it's what drives us to survive. You wanted to tame that. You can't. Humanity doesn't tame fear. We own it." The transmission cut off. Silence filled the bridge again. Ajax made a sound, half snarl, half sigh. Christopher smiled faintly. "Yeah. I said it better this time." Outside, the council fleet began to pull back. The Directorate ships lingered longer, then turned away one by one. The war wasn't over, but something had shifted. Fear had changed sides. Christopher sat back in the command chair, exhausted but calm. Ajax settled beside him, its breathing steady, a faint hum in its chest. He reached out, brushing his hand across the creature's armor. "You ready to go home?" Ajax blinked slowly, its golden eyes reflecting the distant stars. "Yeah," Christopher said softly. "Me neither." He set the ship's course for deep space, no destination, no orders, no masters. Just 2 survivors bound by something older than war. As the stars stretched again, the void swallowed their ship whole. Somewhere, far behind them, the council whispered new legends, of a man who built fear itself and taught it loyalty. And out there in the dark, Commander Christopher and Ajax kept flying, waiting for whatever came next. The years slipped past like ripples through the void. Out there, among the border stars, silence was not emptiness, it was peace earned in blood and metal. No one heard from Commander Christopher again. No one saw Ajax, the last honey badger. But their story spread anyway. From miners' taverns on the moons of Orion to the diplomatic chambers of the Galactic Council, the whispers grew into myth. They said a lone human ship still haunted the deep sectors, ghost lights flickering across derelict colonies, wrecks left untouched as if something massive had passed through. The survivors of pirate ambushes told the same tale, a blur of metal and muscle that tore through entire fleets, protecting the weak, then vanishing before dawn. Some said it was a machine. Others swore it was a man. The oldest called it the Ghost and the Beast. And on a forgotten outpost orbiting a dead star, Truth sat quietly. Christopher stood on a balcony overlooking the skeletal remains of what had once been a research station, Epsilon Prime's twin facility, one of the few that hadn't been obliterated in the Directorate purge. He was older now. The beard had gone gray at the edges, the eyes sharper but softer. He wore no insignia. No rank. Just the scars of a life lived hard and long. Ajax lay beside him, its massive frame curled like a resting lion, the armor dulled by time and streaked with patches of organic regrowth. Over the years, the creature had evolved beyond even Christopher's designs, part machine, part legend, part something that didn't need defining anymore. Still watching the stars, he murmured. The beast's head lifted slightly, sensors flickering in answer. Christopher chuckled. You always liked the view. Guess we both got tired of running. He looked out at the faint glow of distant systems, remembering every battle, every betrayal, every face that haunted him. Mara, the Council, the Directorate, Earth, all echoes now. A small transport ship descended through the silence, slow and cautious. Christopher tensed, hand brushing his weapon. Ajax stirred, but he lifted a hand. Easy, boy. If they came this far, they're not here to fight. The transport settled nearby. A single figure stepped out, tall, armored, unarmed. When she removed her helmet, Christopher felt the years collapse in on themselves. Mara, he said quietly. She looked older, too. Time had carved regret into her features. You really did vanish, she said. Took me a decade to find your trail. He studied her for a long moment. You came to finish what you started? She shook her head. I came to tell you that you were right. Ajax rose slightly, watching, silent but alert. Mara's gaze lingered on the creature. So it lived. Christopher smiled faintly. He lived. He learned. He changed. She stepped closer, voice low. The Council collapsed 2 years ago. The Directorate with it. People are rebuilding now. Without monsters. Without gods. Without you. He nodded slowly. Good. Maybe that's how it should be. Mara hesitated. They still speak your name, you know. Children play games pretending to be the human who tamed the honey badger. Some call you a hero. Others call you the last monster. He laughed softly, the sound warm and tired. Maybe I was both. They stood in silence for a moment, the hum of the station filling the space between them. Finally, Mara asked, so what now? Christopher looked down at Ajax, who was watching them both with golden, intelligent eyes. Now. I rest. He watches. The galaxy keeps spinning. Mara looked at the stars, then back at him. You could come back. Help rebuild. People would follow you. He shook his head. The universe doesn't need me anymore. It needs peace. Ajax rumbled softly, as if in agreement. Mara smiled sadly. Goodbye, James. He returned the smile. It's Christopher now. She nodded once, then turned back toward her ship. The engines flared to life, and the small craft lifted away, vanishing into the starlight. Christopher watched until she was gone. Then he looked down at Ajax. You hear that? He said softly. We're stories now. The creature's tail flicked once, amused. Christopher sat down beside him, leaning back against the beast's warm side. The stars reflected in their eyes, one pair human, one something else entirely. He whispered, if they ever find this place, if they come again, show them who we are. Not what we were. Ajax made a low sound, not quite a growl, not quite a purr. The lights dimmed. The station went quiet again, floating endlessly above a dead world. Somewhere far away, a new generation of explorers told the tale of the man who built fear and turned it into loyalty, and of the beast that made the galaxy tremble, not because it killed, but because it chose not to. And in that silence between stars, Christopher closed his eyes for the last time. Ajax remained still for hours. Days. When it finally moved, it was gentle, standing, gazing once more at the horizon. Then the creature turned toward the darkness and leapt into it, wings of plasma unfurling like a storm reborn. The legend of the honey badger lived on. Because legends, like humanity, never really die.